The marble floor of the Sterling mansion was so polished you could see your own soul in it, or at least, that's what Evelyn felt as she scrubbed it on her hands and knees for the 1000th time. She was invisible here. A ghost in a gray uniform. But what Mr. Sterling, the billionaire owner of this estate, didn't know was that the woman cleaning his floors was raising two of the brightest minds the world had never seen. He thought he was doing them a favor by letting them wait in the library while she finished her shift. He had no idea that they weren't just looking at the pictures in his books, they were memorizing them. And when he finally challenged them, thinking it would be a cruel joke, he learned a lesson money can't buy. This story will remind you that brilliance can bloom in the harshest soil. If you love stories about justice and the underdog winning, please hit that subscribe button and like this video right now. It helps us share more incredible stories like this one. Now, let's witness the impossible. The air in the Sterling mansion always smelled like old money, a mix of leather, mahogany, and expensive cologne. For Evelyn, it smelled like back pain and fatigue. She was 40, but her hands looked 60. Every day, she brought her 15-year-old twins, Marcus and Maya, to the estate. She couldn't afford childcare, and the neighborhood they lived in wasn't safe to leave them alone in until late at night. Arthur Sterling was a man who believed the world was a meritocracy, conveniently forgetting that he had started the race 10 miles ahead of everyone else. He was the primary donor for the St. Jude's Prep Academic Decathlon team, a squad of elite students who had never seen the inside of a public bus. One rainy Tuesday, Sterling stormed into his library, throwing his briefcase onto a chaotic desk. He had been trying to calculate the structural load for a new bridge project his firm was bidding on. The math was jagged, the physics elusive. He growled in frustration and left the room to pour himself a scotch. In the corner, sitting quietly on the floor, were Marcus and Maya. They were waiting for their mother to finish the foyer. Marcus nudged Maya. Maya adjusted her taped-up glasses and looked at the paper sprawled on the mahogany desk. "The coefficient is wrong," she whispered.
"Yeah,"
Marcus murmured. He didn't account for the thermal expansion of the steel alloy. They shouldn't have touched it. They knew the rules. Be invisible. But the error was itching at their brains. It was like seeing a picture hanging crooked. Maya stood up, grabbed a pencil from the desk, and made 3 quick corrections. Marcus scribbled a formula in the margin. They sat back down just as Sterling returned. He froze. He saw the kids. He saw the pencil out of place. "What did you touch?" he barked. Evelyn came running in, breathless, holding a mop. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. I told them to sit still. We're leaving right now." Sterling ignored her. He was staring at the papers. The jagged math was gone. The equation balanced perfectly. He looked at the twins, then at the paper, then back at the twins. These children, wearing sneakers held together by duct tape, had just solved a problem that 2 of his senior engineers were struggling with. "Who wrote this?" Sterling asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I did, sir," Maya said, her voice trembling but her chin high. "The thermal expansion, it changes the load distribution." Sterling sat down slowly. "Do you know what the Academic Decathlon is?" The invitation was an anomaly. It was a scandal. The Academic Decathlon was the Super Bowl of smarts. It was where the sons and daughters of senators, CEOs, and surgeons competed for Ivy League spots. When Sterling announced he was sponsoring an independent team consisting of his maid's children, the board of the competition laughed. They thought it was a publicity stunt. A charity case to make Sterling look benevolent. "They don't have the pedigree," Arthur, Mrs. Higgins, the mother of the reigning champion, sneered at a gala. "They go to a public school that doesn't even have newer textbooks than 1998. You're setting them up for humiliation." "Let them compete," Sterling said, swirling his drink. "If they lose, I donate $1 million to the legacy fund. If they win, you have to publicly apologize to Evelyn." The weeks leading up to the decathlon were a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. Sterling opened his library to them, but the real work happened in their small, cramped apartment. The reality of poverty is that it takes up brain space. It's hard to study quantum mechanics when you're wondering if the electricity will stay on. It's hard to memorize the periodic table when the neighbors are arguing through thin walls. Evelyn took extra shifts. She worked herself to the bone so she could buy them high-protein food for brain power. She sat with them until 3 a.m., holding the flashlight while they quizzed each other when the power actually did go out. "Why are you doing this, Ma?" Marcus asked one night, rubbing his tired eyes. "Because," Evelyn said, smoothing his hair. "The world thinks you are what you wear. I want you to show them you are what you know." The day of the decathlon arrived. The venue was a massive university auditorium, filled with banners, cameras, and a hushed, judgmental crowd. The St. Jude's team looked like a battalion of soldiers in their crisp navy blazers. Marcus and Maya walked in wearing plain white button-downs and black slacks Evelyn had bought from a thrift store and ironed until they looked sharp. They held hands. They were the only all-black team. They were the only team of two. Most squads had 5 members to distribute the workload. The competition was brutal. It was split into 10 events: art, music, language and literature, mathematics, economics, science, and social science, followed by the speech, interview, and the dreaded super quiz. The morning sessions were written exams. Silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the scratching of pencils. During the lunch break, the tension was palpable. Marcus went to the bathroom and heard 2 boys from St. Jude's talking. The Maid's kids? Please. I bet they can't even spell a decathlon. Sterling just wants a tax write-off. Marcus gripped the edge of the sink. He looked in the mirror. He didn't see a Maid's kid. He saw the nights his mother scrubbed floors so he could read. He saw the candle burning in the dark. He walked out with his head high. The afternoon brought the live rounds. This was where the crowd expected them to crumble. In mathematics, the question was projected on the screen. Calculate the volume of a torus generated by revolving the circle open parenthesis x minus r close parenthesis squared plus z squared equals r squared around the z-axis. Most students reached for their scratch paper. Maya hit her buzzer in 4 seconds. 2 pi squared, big R, little r squared. Correct. In music theory, they were asked to identify a dissonant chord progression from a 17th century composition. Marcus, who had never owned an instrument but had memorized the frequency of sounds from library books, answered before the clip finished playing. Correct. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Higgins fanned herself aggressively. Sterling sat in the front row, his face unreadable, but his fingers were tapping rhythmically on his knee. By the time they reached the final event, the super quiz, it was a statistical dead heat. St. Jude's Prep had 48,000 points. The Sterling Independents, Marcus and Maya, had 47,800. They were trailing by a sliver. The super quiz was a relay. Rapid-fire questions on the theme of the year, the history of Cold War espionage and nuclear physics. The moderator, a stern man with a bow tie, looked at the final 2 teams standing. This is the final question. It is worth 500 points. Winner takes all. The room went deathly silent. Evelyn was in the back, twisting her apron in her hands, praying silently. The question is, in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine flotilla commander refused an order to launch a nuclear torpedo, likely preventing World War III. Name the commander and the specific type of submarine he was aboard. The St. Jude's captain, a boy named Chad, looked panicked. He whispered frantically to his teammates. They knew the commander's name, it was common knowledge in history class, but the specific type of submarine? That was a detail buried in technical schematics, not general history books. Chad hit the buzzer first. Vasily Arkhipov, he said confidently. And the submarine, the moderator asked. A Soviet K-19 class? Incorrect, the moderator stated coldly. The crowd gasped. The door was open. Marcus looked at Maya. They communicated without speaking. They remembered a book they found in Sterling's trash bin 3 years ago, a declassified military journal. They remembered reading it because the diagrams reminded them of a spaceship. Maya pressed the buzzer. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The commander was Vasily Arkhipov, she said, her voice ringing clear across the auditorium. He was aboard the BF-59, which was a Project 641 Foxtrot-class diesel-electric submarine. The moderator looked down at his card. He paused. He looked up over his glasses. That is, absolutely correct. The scoreboard flashed. For a second, there was no sound. Then, the auditorium exploded. But it wasn't the polite golf claps of the wealthy elite. It was the roar of shock. Evelyn didn't scream. She just collapsed into her chair and wept. Mrs. Higgins looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Sterling stood up. He walked up to the stage as Marcus and Maya stood there, stunned by the noise. He took the microphone from the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling said, his voice booming. For years, I have employed the mother of these children. I have walked past her every day. I have ignored her struggles. I assumed that because I had money, I had the monopoly on potential. He turned to Marcus and Maya. I was wrong. Today, you didn't just beat the best schools in the country. You scored a perfect 1,000 in the super quiz. That has never been done in the history of this competition. He turned to the crowd. These children studied by candlelight. They learned physics from books held together by rubber bands. Just imagine what they will do when we actually give them the light they deserve. Sterling turned to Evelyn in the back of the room. Mrs. Evelyn, you will never scrub a floor again. And Marcus, Maya, you have full scholarships. Anywhere. MIT, Harvard, Oxford. You choose. Marcus grabbed the microphone. He looked at the St. Jude's team, who were looking at their shoes in shame. Then he looked at the camera streaming the event. We aren't exceptions, Marcus said, his voice cracking with emotion. There are millions of kids just like us in neighborhoods you never visit. We aren't rare. We just haven't been given a chance. Don't look at us and see a miracle. Look at us and ask yourself, how many other geniuses are you ignoring because they're holding a mop? Marcus and Maya went on to revolutionize renewable energy. Maya is currently a leading engineer at NASA, and Marcus runs a nonprofit that provides advanced STEM textbooks to inner-city kids. Evelyn manages the foundation. They prove that intelligence isn't a matter of heritage, it's a matter of hunger. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Let's remind the world that you can't judge a book by its cover, and you certainly can't judge a future by a zip code. Don't forget to subscribe and comment True Potential below if you made it to the end.